I started the short course program at Sturt in the early 2000s, 2001 I think. Got sucked into mainstream teaching in TAFE. I was a part-time teacher, then a full-time teacher, then a head teacher, which was a bad move, of product and furniture design. I left there and went to Sturt as the full-time director in 2010. And then after that, that was a bit short-lived too. Sounds like I can't hold a job, doesn't it? But Heartwood lasted for 10 years. So let's just have a look at this. So this was our machine shop. This was in the first Cadillac plant in Australia, which was in Marrickville. And Marrickville was very grungy, but very artistic because it was grungy. And so we purpose built that. So this was, we basically had a big concrete box with no windows. We had no windows. So that's quite a challenge in itself. So this is basically, that was our little machine shop. And you can, in the back room there, you can see we had a little sanding, routing sort of power room. Oh, here we go. And there we are with some students in with their orange earmuffs on. Orange was our colour, by the way. So orange aprons, orange earmuffs. We've got the back room there with people doing sort of typical activities. Next door to that, if you remember, oh, hello. There we go. Next door to that, this was our bench room. Again, big concrete box, but you can see the windows. We had these big observation windows that were double glazed, and we could hear. So we built it because of that, so that at any point you could sort of step backwards. If you heard, every woodworker in this room will know that you hear a funny noise and you go, doesn't sound good, and you kind of step backwards and you have a look and you go, okay, that's okay, we're good to go, or I can be straight in there. So we, because of the nature of what we did, we started out and we, the idea was we take students, so we took these students, and we would have 8 in the class and 2 teachers, and we ran for 3 hours every night of the week and 4 classes on the weekend. And we did try daytimes, but sorry, I'm not going to diss retirees here, but I would be there. And the retirees would go, I'm going to walk the El Camino, and it's like, great, I'd love to walk the El Camino, but you're going to be gone for 3 months. So we kind of gave up on that one. But we had, the guys are holding a little table, a little 2-dayer. Our client base in Sydney was very different. People could only spare short periods of time. We had 16 full-timers that came and they stayed with me, and most of them stayed with me for 10, maybe 12 years. And they were allowed to build what they wanted. Okay. We, after COVID, which was incredibly brutal, we had an opportunity, we kind of foolishly kind of went, we're going to go big or go home. And we did end up going home. But another 200 square meters became available behind our workshop, and so we took it. And this was in a so our part had been part of the admin building, so it was a big concrete bunker, no windows, and so this part was out where the pigeons flew around and shat on the machines and all that sort of stuff. And the caretaker would walk around and shoot them. So, with his air rifle. So we kind of, this is what we built. This was our maker's space. We had an idea, and this is the problem that I think all of us here would understand, is that how do you, for young makers, how do you build a viable career path? You know, what's your career path look like? And in the early stages, that's always very difficult. Once you're making your connections and building your networks and all that. So the idea was, if you look at, this is what we called their bedrooms, okay? We had 5 makers, each little maker, oh here we are, there's their bedroom. They each had a bedroom, which took a bench, their personal tools, their clamps or whatever, and that was their personal space, which I think was 10 or 12 square meters. And then at the front we had 2 full sheet assembly tables, and we obviously had the machine shop here, that was our drop saw bench, timber storage was under there. And what we did was we had absolutely identical machines to the machines we had in the school. And what we did was we offered our makers 2 nights a week, so that's 6 hours. And with that 6 hours, they could afford their space, right? And a little bit on top. And if they wanted to do more, they could have more. And they did weekend courses, short courses, And the idea was we would then mentor them and support them through exhibitions and whatever else. Sadly, I think we'd left that too late, and Carol and I were just too exhausted, so we kept going for a couple of years. Oh, and there it was. What a glorious space. Who wouldn't want that with roof access? Yeah, and that was us. So we had a Christmas where we completely fitted it out, machined it and did the whole lot so that we could be up and running in January. So quite a task. Okay, so here's a bit of my work. Most of this is exhibition stuff. I think that, Sturt alumni. This one's got a funny story. I think it's very amusing. I spent a lot of time out front of the headmaster's office with my nose pointing to the wall. And Faulkner Minor was a bit of a disappointment, whereas Faulkner Major was a little bit more galvanised. And so as it came about for this vital exhibition, I thought, right, I'm going to make a school desk that's got it's basically a lifted up desk minus the tool well. So that was a piece that, and so basically I don't have a vast number of pieces, which I think is very disappointing. But Carol would force me to make one piece a year, basically because the school was so all-consuming that I just ended up I did one a year. Another exhibition piece. This was for the Design Centre in Sydney. We took one of our standard projects and we added new profiles and textures and techniques and painted finishes, and you can just see the skull on there. That one was something we were playing with. I like those sorts of things. I like the idea of I can take something and I can modify it, and it's the level of hidden detail. Okay. Now this will lead. Actually, this is better than I thought. This is going to lead in nicely to my next part, which will be about. So this one was for Chatoyans. It says a date there. And when I looked at it, I thought the bench on itself was incredibly bland. Although it was an amazing piece of bee swing, white beech or whatever. So the leather cushion really was great. It kind of highlighted that the figure was there, just being around the edge. And I tend to like really simple forms. I'm a great believer in that. If the form of it is right, then the embellishments will just take it a little bit further. This is one we did with a big furniture design company in Sydney called Colt. Actually this is one I wish I kept. One of my students walked in and went, "I'll buy that." And I was so flattered, I went, "Of course you will, I'll sell it to you." It's multi-tapered laminations which have curvatures in them. It's a plectrum-shaped top. Whilst it's a very simple little thing, I just think all the scale and weight and shapes are really nice. It's got a level of detail that draws you in. The chairs, I think that's when I met you, Lou, isn't it? Or somewhere around that point. And I threw myself on my knees in front of the audience and went, "Yes, I know it could be better." And I know all the faults in that one, but that's what you get if you only give yourself a couple of weeks to make something. So where are we now? Okay, and I had a period, sorry, I didn't know there was quite so much in here. I had a period where we moved into a block of apartments, and I had this beautiful Jarrah table that I made when I was straight out of college, and it was this wonderful thing. And so we're stood at the lift. It's a 3-man lift. And we've got this table. No way is this thing going in, right? And a whole lot of scratches later, I rang up the Salvation Army and said, "I've got a table here. I believe you guys come and collect." And they went, "Yep, good." I said, "I'll put it out on the street. Pick it up." And the guy came and said to me, he said, "Seriously, you're giving that to us, the Salvos?" And I went, "Yep. Doesn't fit in the lift, can't have it. It's got to go." And I don't think all our neighbours would want to see me burn it in the garden. So I got into this idea of flat packing, that if it didn't fit in the laser and if it didn't fit in the lift, then it wasn't going in the apartment. So I kind of got into these threaded rods and different things. The little stool won a Green Design Award in 2010 at a furniture fair. This is some of the stuff that I had a phase where I got into sandblasting and retro thing, and little rocket boy I like. That was kind of inspired by coopering, but not coopering in the round, but just coopering just edge angles. And little rocket boy has those. You can obviously see that it's got shaker undertones. You know, we have this vast, beautiful kind of library of things that have gone by that last two. Okay. Hang on. Last two here. The shoe box, which is completely completely veneered inside and out, that stands. I think it stands about 1.8 to 2 meters. It took 10 pairs of shoes. I was so proud of it. I took it home and gave it to Carol, and she went, "You're going to need another 2 of those at least." And having spent many months on it, needless to say, they didn't get made. So the one next door to it was experimenting with freeform laminations, just a start and an end point twisted through. Okay, so that was COVID. Thank God, Timmy Noon saved me. Timmy Noon just said, "I've got some commissions that I can't build. Do you want to do them?" So I just got these pictures, no dimensions, no anything, just, "Can you build one of these?" So off we went. This one is kind of interesting. Somebody got in touch with me and said, "Can you make a scabbard?" And I was desperate for work, and I just sharpened 80 chisels for a school. And you can imagine what a school chisel looks like. I had just sharpened and chewed 80 of those, plus 20 bench plates. So when they said, "Can you make a scabbard?" I said, "Yes, yes, I can make a scabbard." And then he said, "It's a Japanese one," and I went, "Yeah, okay, okay." And then, of course, it's a samurai sword. And so you then Google it, as you do, because you go, right, can't be that hard. Oh my God. You have to buy a particular chisel. You have to have a Cyanomi, and luckily I rang Christian up and I went, "Christian, you wouldn't have a Cyanomi, would you?" And he went, "What the hell would you want a Cyanomi for?" Christian runs Japanese schools Australia. I said, "I just need one." He went, "Do you know what? I think I have got one." I picked up something. I'll go through my car boot sales, because you get really easy to hand it stuff. And he rings me up and says, "Yeah, I think I've got something for you." So it's not in there, but I get this Cyanomi. It took me countless days to fettle it, make a handle on it, shape it, and you make the whole scabbard by hand. So you hold it in your hand, you hold the chisel here, and you gouge the groove carefully all the way. And you have to have more in one side than the other side, so that the blade doesn't run on the seam. And then you have to pin it in, and this, I think it's a Second World War relic. I think that's why it's not in its dress scabbard, and that dress scabbard doesn't exist. And that was kind of really damaged. I cut myself numerous times on it, so even though it was 50 years old, had my blood on it more than once. So I get interesting things. These are just stuff that Carol and I do, short courses, benches and courses that we've produced in the past. Oh, here we go. This will lead nicely into the design work. So the drawing is always there for me. Model making has always been there for me. Oops, hello. Here's some student work. I love this one. I wanted to buy this. This boy wanted to make a coopered fruit bowl, right? He was a bit of a savant. He worked for the Reserve Bank in Australia, and he was just brilliant with maths. And he went, "I can do the maths to sort this out." And I went, "Okay, I'll build a jig," because that's what I do. And so we're there, and we've got this fruit bowl, and we're just down to the last 2 parts, and we're going to stick it together. And I look at this thing, and I'm incredibly depressed, and I'm thinking, we put so much work into this, and we're going to have a Huon pine coopered fruit bowl. And so he went home, and I thought about it, and I thought, we can't do this. I can't let this beautiful object. And so I'm stood there with it, and then I went to put it on the shelf, and I put it together this way, and I went, "This is it." And so after much discussion, he then embraced it, and we made it. So these are all examples of more of my ongoing students that did work with us. These were the lucky 16 that never left unless they were pregnant with their second child. They were really, they were a bit more my family, a bit more of that. What else? Okay, so that's sort of how I come to stand here. That's why I don't have a huge profile, but Heartwood took pretty much every waking hour for 10 years. And it was fabulous, and I loved every minute of it. Okay, now, can I give you something sensible to think about here? This will load for me. So I have a presentation. As I said, I went to art school at 16, and what I find interesting is that designers are often quite uncomfortable. They reach a point where they want to design their own stuff, and then they kind of go, well, okay, I'll tell you a little story. I had a guy in 2000, earlier than that. I don't know. Early on in the career, I took over Tom for the Sturt for 3 months whilst Tom went to America, and I had a chap in the class called Michael Freestone, and Michael was absolutely adamant that you couldn't teach design. Couldn't teach design, it's some sort of God-given thing. No, it's not. It's not. What I've always found really interesting is often, we are drawn to what we do because of the tactile aesthetic nature of what we do, and we're often more comfortable with a process or a technique because we've all grown very confident with, we have a very detailed step-by-step. We scribe the baseline, we set our sliding bevel and we put our angles down to our baseline, and whereas design is often a bit more kind of, it's not as defined. It's not a definite. It's not like a mathematical equation where there is only one outcome, right? There are multiple outcomes. That's a boring slide, isn't it? So, but what we can do, smarter people than me have decided that you can break it down into sort of definable processes. Like there is a conceptualization thing. There is research, which I would have to say is sadly dismissed. Most people don't do enough of that, which I think is a shame. There's the design development, then there's the implementation, which is obviously the build process. And by that point, we should know what we're going to build. And then the other one at the end, the evaluation, right? And if you're a good maker, I think, or any kind of maker with a care for what you do, you find yourself looking at your piece and going, well, like my coffee table. I can do that better. Next time, sometimes we don't, but I think it's really valuable to, well, David, you're classic. Your rocking chairs, how many times have you stood back and evaluated it from the beginning and gone, yeah, I could just tweak that a little bit. Yeah?
Yeah. It's ongoing.
Yeah, and it is, still going. And I think this is true. Okay, so, conceptualization. So really, I've got some Americans here so I can use this. So a lot of the books go, so I think we reach a point where, our nieces and nephews or our kids come to us and say, can you build me? And in the American books, they call it the honey list. Right?
Honey-do list.
Yeah. Honey, can you build me a...
I got one of those right now.
I
haven't showed you. I can't show you.
If you stay here long enough, you'll get, it's not the same here, it's, can you knock us up a... Yeah. Can you knock us up? Yeah. Can you knock us up one of those? Knock us up. So I quite.
That's a different meaning.
So somewhere along the line, somebody says, "I would like 2 of those, Dad," or "I would like a couple of those." Or, "Can you build me this?" Or if it's a commission, it's obviously a bit more structured, and that's great. But I think if you then, so it doesn't have to be actually more difficult than, I'm going to build a table, right? Or I'm going to build a desk, or I'm going to build a chair, or I'm going to build a cabinet. Brilliant, okay? So you've defined that you're going to build an object. It doesn't tell you what that object is going to look like. It just says, I'm going to build that object, and then we can get some structure around it. Once you've said, I'm going to build a chair, or I'm going to build, you can then flesh that out by saying, what will it be used for? So a kitchen table is going to be very different to a garden table, which is going to be very different to a coffee table. Okay, so once you find what the function is a really good way of starting your design process by working out some parameters. What size should I make it? Well, if it's a coffee table for my apartment that has to go in the lift, you've got to make it damn small to get in the laser. But if it's, a 10-seater dining table that's got to expand, then that's a different ballgame. But again, you've got some parameters with which you can work to. Who will use it? Well, that's always very interesting. So if you've ever built I've built a lot of rocking horses in my time, just because most people stayed with me so long, they would go, I've got to build a rocking horse. That's it, I've got to build a rocking horse. And I'd have about 2 or 3 plans, and we'd launch into a rocking horse. So who uses it is important. The needs of a child are much different to an adult, and people with disabilities or special needs, their uses, that's really quite interesting too. I've done a little bit of that in the past. Where it's going to be, the environment that it's going to go into is going to influence, are there architectural details, colours, whatever within that house that are going to influence what you might do with your design. What should it look like? Style. So that one's style. So my little rocket table, little rocket boy, was influenced by the Shakers because I was obviously looking through it then. And as I said, that sort of our beautiful history of furniture design is all there for us to go back and get influenced by, okay? And then the visual impact. Some pieces are not always functional, like Adam's. Adam's went from being probably functional as a fruit bowl to being this beautiful artwork, which was completely non-functional. But I would have bought it. We should still use it. So from that, once you've started to flesh it out, you can say to yourself, let's put some real specifics on it. So what's the height? So we all know that most dining room tables are 700 to 750, unless you're probably John, who's a bit bigger, and so 800 might be nice for you or something like that. So, and then, go back to my apartment. Does it want to sit 2 or 6 or 8? Should it incorporate storage? Those sorts of things. Now, the inspiration thing I think is always really interesting, okay? I am a great believer, and I see it with the students all the time, is that if you only look at furniture, you will copy what you see, or a variant of it, right? If you really want to make imaginative things, then you need to look outside of that sphere. So you need to take your lens or your prism, your way of seeing things, and you find yourself going to. I used to go every year to the exhibition at Canberra because I used to have to go and check out what Rodney was doing and what was it like against what we were doing at Sturt, and so I go through the furniture things, were very good. But what I was really waiting for was to get into the jewellery exhibition and the glass exhibition, because here were objects that I had no idea how they made them, and they were completely different scale, but they were wonderful. You look at them and you go, that could be, and I think that is really where imaginative work comes from. So I have a visual diary, which is often a bit like my desk. This is probably the cleanest this bench has been in the whole time I've been here. It's a little bit chaotic, but I would suggest you have one and you use it. Okay, so sketching. I meet a lot of students and they go, I can't draw. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Drawing is not what it's about. Drawing is just a vehicle. Sketching is just a vehicle for you to express your ideas and get them out. And design is a numbers game. The more opportunities you have, or the more variants you have on paper, the more opportunity you have to get it right. Here's a classic, right? This guy, I look at it and I think, would I have made it? No. I don't think my brain wouldn't go that laterally, but I think it's wonderful. It obviously, well, what do you think it looks like?
A stool.
Yeah, it's a stool, yes, but where do you think their inspiration came
Like
from?
a needle.
A pin cushion.
Pin cushion, yeah.
Inside of a flower.
Yeah. So I've got his actual thing here, and he said yes. He was it says visually inspired by midwife's stethoscopes and the stamen of a flower. So that's how that guy got to that seating thing. And of course it's active seating because it rocks around. And so I just love it because I would never have created it, but I think it's a really good example of if you look outside of your own world to other things like nature and those sorts of things. Now, having banged on about research is often very easy, and we've got a little man sat in a chair with heights and angles and backs and don't neglect that part of it. Get fully aware, and you might be inspired by our process. I mean, the guys next door are steam bending at the moment, and that's fascinating. And you can, if you really get embedded in that process, then you start to, Yuri's the best example. You know, you can take it to other limits, to a stratosphere where the rest of us just can't even imagine how you get to that. But a process might be your thing, might be the thing that really inspires you. Okay, here we go. So in practical terms, what does it mean to us? We can do drawing. And like I said, do not be fazed by the quality of your drawing. I think there's something beautifully written that the best story is not written with the nicest handwriting, right? So it doesn't matter how well you draw, it's the fact that you are actually getting those ideas out and getting them on paper, right? They're there. And the other one is, if Don comes along and he looks at my sketchbook, and I'll give him an opportunity. Models and mock-ups, yes, we know what they are. So there's my sketchbook. Now Don could come along and he could choose one tiny little element of something on there and see it through his prism. And that will give him a completely different idea to what I will do. And this is when I'm teaching with students, and obviously we did product design for many years, and we did furniture design, and at the TAFE it was a very different world. We didn't have the opportunity to build the skills that you guys get. It was more of an assemblage thing. But we did win the Design Institute of Australasian student furniture competition 3 years in a row, and we had first and third in the last year. And that's because, and I would say to the students, I need to see all the pages. I need to see, because what you've already discounted might trigger something in me, and we can go there. So, but for you guys, a good place to start, yes, I've lifted this from Pekovic. A good place to start is, it doesn't have to be sophisticated. It can, well, we all know a rectangle in this instance represents a cabinet, right? And we know that if we start dividing that rectangle up in different ways, it can be doors, it can be drawers, it can be voids, it can be shelves. And actually the top line is really the important thing. If you're sat there and you don't know what you're going to do, just start making marks, you know, just lines, horizontal lines, vertical lines, lines on an angle. And then you can expand it out to whatever it is. It's going to be circles or squares or rectangles or whatever. The main one is, they have proved time and time again, yes, I can use CAD badly, but I can use CAD, but they have proved time and time again that the connection between hand and brain in the creative process is completely different between that when you're using a computer program. What I noticed with our young kids was they were very seduced by, we can put render works on it, and we can do photo works, and we can put it in a space, but somewhere below that they would go, I want it to be like this, but actually I can't do that because I haven't got mastery of the program to make it a curve, something, whatever, so I'll make it square. And automatically you've just trashed your whole design because by the limitations of your project. You might feel more comfortable, as I do it big and colour it in. Who doesn't love a bit of colouring in? Let's face it, eh? Bit of chalk there. For most things I do, wherever possible, I will do it at full scale, and I do love to colour it in because I love to colour it in. And then model making. Model making, brilliant. You can use anything that takes your fancy, foam core, cardboard, you know, foam. Basically, I think what I want to do here is say to people, look, design is not this intimidating thing. It's not, right? It's like dovetailing. If you do it frequently and you practice it, it becomes so much easier. But the main thing is, nothing's going to happen without enthusiasm. Nothing's going to happen without you starting, right? So make a start. You don't even need to have decided what it is to start with, but get into the habit of doing it. This was okay, I remember that. Actually, we made it really interesting. This guy collected replica Lord of the Rings swords. right? And we made a stand as his laminating project to have Aragon's sword mounted in it. Yeah, I made some weird things. So this one, so this guy hated drawing, absolutely refused to, hated it. Clever bloke, really clever bloke. Done many years in the RAF or in Australia. They're called something else over there. And so, but you can see that his vehicle, he made himself a little model that then fell apart, and he was all frustrated about that. And I said, well, just go get some pine, make it full size. And he did. And that opened the door for him. And he found a vehicle with which he could express himself, that he was comfortable with. He could pull parts off, reshape them, put them back on, screw it back together. Sometimes they were like a Swiss cheese. We had more bog and dowels holding this thing together than there was timber in many instances. But, you know, you just find what works for you. Implementation is, I think that's one of Michael's. I think it is with all the matching clamp. I just love the matching clamp heads. who cannot love that? Okay. Implementation for us is often the easiest bit, because as we go through our career, we get much more confident with how a technique and how we master that technique and how we use that technique. But, and then evaluation. A critical eye at the end, you know, yeah, take the time to look at it. You have put so much effort generally into it at the front end. Look at it and say to yourself, well, what could I have done differently? What could I do better? Does it inspire me to go somewhere else? Could I make a difference in here? And I finished with that one purely because in 2010, I think it was, my first year, I had I sound like I'm bashing retirees, I'm not that far off myself, but I had 10 retirees and this kid who was 17. I had my oldest student who was Brian, who was 80 something, and I had this kid, I've lost his name now, and he had just turned 17, and his granny was paying him to be at Sturt. And he sat there, and he had the bench in front of Brian, and they got on famously. They were just inseparable, those two. But what I like about this was he didn't have a lot of confidence. He started making a few models, and then this beautiful thing came out of it, and we could build it. What I love about this is obviously it's kerfing, and he's put wedges in there to create the kerf. It's got a big breadboard end. You can't see that that's actually shaped. I think what it was, he came back with a postcard of some Japanese thing, and he just embraced it. And I thought he was so clever, and I just love that piece because of it. Yeah. So hopefully after my design rant, it's not a difficult thing. I think we can all do. I think it's one of those things that it's a beautiful part of the process. It's a third of the process. It's the front end of the design is the third, making is the third, and then the finishing and bringing it all together is the third. So there you go, troops. I hope you enjoyed that. Find that useful. Yeah.
Thank you.